9 minutes. That's all it took for justice to find 3 young bullies who dared to harass an 83-year-old decorated war hero wearing his medals in public. In this world where respect seems increasingly rare, what happened next wasn't just unexpected. It was a masterclass in swift, decisive consequences. What would you do if you witnessed someone mocking an elderly veteran's medals of honor? Those small pieces of metal and ribbon represent blood spilled, brothers lost, and sacrifices most of us will never comprehend. Would you stand by and watch? Or would you intervene? For the group of Navy SEALs who happened upon this scene, the choice was immediate and absolute. Their response to this blatant disrespect became a moment that changed lives and ignited a community. Before we dive into this powerful story of justice, honor, and the unbreakable bond between warriors past and present, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Story by Liam for more tales that remind us what true respect looks like. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might just restore your faith in humanity. Today's account centers on Colonel Arthur Montrose, his chest adorned with medals earned through blood and sacrifice. His quiet dignity was challenged by 3 young men who thought nothing of mocking what they didn't understand. But they couldn't have anticipated who was about to round the corner, or how quickly their smirks would vanish from their faces. What unfolded in those 9 critical minutes would send shockwaves through a community, create headlines across the nation, and teach a lesson that none of those involved would ever forget. Colonel Arthur Montrose walked with a slight bend in his posture, not from weakness, but from the weight of history he carried on his shoulders. At 83, his face bore the gentle lines of time, each wrinkle mapping a journey through life's hardest moments. His eyes, clear blue and alert, contrasted with his weathered skin, revealing a mind still sharp despite his advancing years. He dressed impeccably each day. Pressed slacks, polished shoes, and that navy blue cardigan where his medals caught the light, gleaming against the dark fabric like stars in a night sky. Colonel Montrose didn't speak much about Vietnam, but his Bronze Star told stories he couldn't bring himself to voice. Awarded for valor under enemy fire, it represented a day when he'd carried 2 wounded men to safety while bullets tore through the jungle around them. The Vietnam Service Medal marked nearly 3 years in a conflict that divided a nation but united the men who fought side by side. His campaign ribbons chronicled deployments across continents, places where he'd watched brothers fall and missions succeed at terrible cost. Each medal on his chest represented not just personal achievement, but collective sacrifice. The colonel had commanded men half his current age, making decisions that determined who came home and who didn't. His military career spanned decades, through wars both declared and undeclared, leaving him with honors that cost more than civilian minds could comprehend. Every morning at precisely 6 a.m., Colonel Montrose rose from bed, a habit unchanged since his first day of basic training 65 years earlier. He prepared his modest breakfast, read the morning paper front to back, and cleaned his small apartment with military precision. By noon, weather permitting, he embarked on his daily walk through the downtown square. These walks served as both exercise and ritual. Fellow veterans recognized him, exchanging silent nods that communicated more than words ever could. Some days he'd stop at the War Memorial, standing at attention for exactly 3 minutes, one for each friend whose name was etched in stone. He rarely spoke during these moments, his silence conveying a reverence ordinary conversation couldn't capture. On special occasions, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, the anniversary of fallen comrades, he wore his full complement of medals. Most days, including this fateful autumn afternoon, he chose a select few that meant the most to him personally. What made Colonel Montrose truly remarkable wasn't his collection of medals, but what they hadn't changed about him. Despite witnessing humanity at its worst, he maintained an unshakable belief in its potential for good. Children who approached him with curious questions about his medals received patient, gentle answers, sanitized of horror, but rich with lessons about courage and duty. The colonel lived alone now, his wife having passed 5 years earlier. Their children and grandchildren lived across the country, making his connection to the community all the more vital. For many locals, he embodied living history. a walking reminder that freedom's price isn't abstract, but paid by ordinary people who chose extraordinary courage when their nation called. The downtown square bustled with midday activity under a crisp autumn sky. Street vendors called out to passing shoppers, while office workers hurried through their lunch breaks. Trees with golden red leaves lined the wide walkways, their branches swaying gently in the cool breeze. At the center stood a modest war memorial, a bronze statue surrounded by stone benches where Colonel Montrose often paused during his walks. This particular Thursday, the colonel moved at his usual measured pace through the square. His right hand occasionally rose to adjust his medals, ensuring they remained properly aligned on his cardigan. To most passers-by, he was simply another elderly gentleman enjoying the afternoon air. To those who understood what those medals represented, he was living history deserving of profound respect. From across the square, 3 young men in their early 20s emerged from a coffee shop, energy drinks in hand and laughter cutting through the ambient city noise. Connor, tall and lanky with a perpetual smirk, led the trio. Beside him walked Malik, shorter but muscular, a backward cap pulled low over his eyes. Trevor, the third, kept glancing at his phone between bursts of conversation. They might have continued past the colonel without incident, but Connor nudged Malik when he spotted the gleaming medals. "Check out Grandpa's jewelry collection," he muttered, just loud enough for his friends to hear. Their trajectory shifted, angling directly toward the elderly veteran with purposeful strides. "Hey, old-timer, what's with the bling?" Connor called out, his voice carrying across the square. Several heads turned briefly before looking away, a collective moment of discomfort but not intervention. Colonel Montrose stopped, turning slowly to face the approaching young men. His expression remained neutral, hands clasped behind his back in a stance familiar to anyone who'd served. "Those are some pretty pins you got there," Malik added, circling slightly to the colonel's right. "What, you win those in a cereal box?" Trevor laughed too loudly, phone now forgotten in his pocket. "My grandpa had fake ones like that from a costume shop." The colonel's voice, when he finally spoke, carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard without shouting. "These medals represent service to our country, young men. Perhaps we could continue our separate ways now." Instead of backing down, Connor stepped closer, invading the personal space of a man 4 times his age. "Service? You mean like waiting tables? Because those look like some fancy name tags." "Please step back," the colonel said, firmer now but still controlled. "I have no quarrel with you." Malik reached toward one of the medals, fingers inches from the bronze star. "Let me see one of these. Bet they're not even real gold." The colonel shifted backward, a subtle move to protect not himself but the symbols of honor on his chest. His eyes, previously calm, now held a warning, not of fear but of principle. He'd faced far worse than these young men, but he wouldn't dishonor his medals by engaging in a public confrontation. "Real soldiers don't need to wear their trophies around town," Trevor taunted, emboldened by the colonel's restraint. "Unless you're just looking for attention." Bystanders began to gather at the perimeter, smartphones appearing in hands. A middle-aged woman stepped halfway forward before hesitating, uncertain how to intervene. 2 teenage boys watched wide-eyed from a nearby bench, one whispering urgently into his phone. The bullies formed a loose triangle around Colonel Montrose, cutting off his easy exit. Their voices grew louder, their gestures more animated. Connor, feeding off the attention, gave the colonel's shoulder a light push, testing boundaries, seeing how far he could go without consequence. "Maybe he bought them online," Malik suggested, reaching again for the medals. "Let's see how real they are." The colonel's hand rose to protect his bronze star, dignity intact but options narrowing with each passing moment. The crowd around Colonel Montrose and his harassers grew larger with each passing minute. A businesswoman set down her briefcase, phone already recording the confrontation. 2 construction workers removed their hard hats, exchanging glances that communicated silent outrage. A group of high school students stood frozen, witnessing a line being crossed that even teenage rebellion recognized as wrong. "Someone should do something," whispered a mother to her teenage son, her grip on his shoulder tightening. "I've called the police," an elderly man announced loudly, his voice wavering with anger rather than fear. "They're on their way." Yet despite the gathering witnesses, no one stepped forward. The space between intervention and observation remained unbridged, a hesitation that would haunt some of them later. Their collective discomfort hung in the air, palpable as the autumn breeze that carried fallen leaves across the square. Connor's patience with the colonel's dignity was wearing thin. What had started as casual mockery had evolved into something uglier, the need to provoke a reaction to break the old man's composure. "Let me see what these metals are really made of," Connor demanded, his hand shooting forward toward the bronze star. The colonel moved with surprising quickness, stepping back while shielding his medals with one hand. "Young man, these are not yours to touch," he stated firmly, his voice carrying the command of decades past. Malik flanked to the right, creating a distraction while Trevor advanced from the left. In a coordinated movement, Trevor lunged forward, fingers grasping the edge of the bronze star, tugging hard enough that the pin securing it began to tear through the colonel's cardigan. "Got one," Trevor laughed, the metal halfway detached. Colonel Montrose's eyes flashed, not with fear but with a fierce protectiveness. These weren't merely decorations, they represented fallen brothers, blood-soaked earth, promises kept to those who never came home. His hand closed around Trevor's wrist with unexpected strength, halting the theft mid-action. The confrontation had begun exactly 9 minutes earlier, when Connor first spotted the colonels across the square. 9 minutes of escalating disrespect, of crossed boundaries, of an 83-year-old veteran standing alone against 3 young men with no understanding of what they mocked. 9 minutes. The same amount of time it took for a certain group of elite warriors to complete their routine coffee stop 3 blocks away. 9 minutes that would dramatically alter the course of everyone involved. If you're finding your blood boiling at this display of disrespect, hit that like button right now. Comment below with what you would have done if you witnessed this scene unfolding. Would you have stepped in? Because what happens next will show exactly what standing up for our veterans truly means. As Trevor maintained his grip on the bronze star, the colonel's eyes moved past his attackers, focusing on something, or someone, approaching from behind them. His expression shifted subtly from resolve to recognition. The bullies, focused on their target, remained oblivious to what was coming their way. They arrived without fanfare, no sirens, no shouting, no dramatic music to announce their presence. Just the purposeful footsteps of men who moved with economy and precision, cutting through the crowd like water around stones. 3 figures emerged from the gathering of onlookers, their civilian clothes belying their military bearing. They walked with the unmistakable confidence of men accustomed to high-stakes situations, their eyes quickly assessing the scene with practiced efficiency. These weren't ordinary bystanders stepping forward. These were Navy SEALs, among the most elite warriors on Earth. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. A path cleared without anyone needing to ask, spectators stepping aside instinctively as if recognizing an incoming force of nature. Sergeant First Class Marcus Burnett led the approach, his 6'2" frame moving with controlled power. At 34, his close-cropped dark hair and clean-shaven face projected professional discipline. Though dressed in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, his posture and presence marked him unmistakably as military. The faded scar running along his right forearm hinted at battles fought far from home. To his right walked Lieutenant Commander Oliver Crane, slightly shorter but broader through the shoulders. His weathered face carried the calm focus of a man who had made life-or-death decisions under impossible pressure. At 38, the streaks of premature gray at his temples spoke of experiences that aged a person beyond their years. His eyes, steady, calculating, missing nothing, took in every detail of the confrontation. Completing the trio was Petty Officer Derek Finch, the youngest at 29, but no less imposing. Lean and quick, he positioned himself with tactical awareness, unconsciously creating a flanking formation with his teammates. The geometric tribal tattoo visible at his wrist extended up under his sleeve, a reminder of missions in places not found on tourist maps. None wore uniforms, having just finished their training session. None needed them to command respect. "That's enough," Sergeant Burnett stated, his voice level but carrying an authority that froze the scene instantly. He stepped directly between Connor and Colonel Montrose, his back to the veteran, facing the bullies with unblinking focus. Lieutenant Commander Crane moved to secure the right flank, while Petty Officer Finch covered the left, creating a protective formation around the colonel without exchanging a single word. The choreography of their movements revealed years of working as a synchronized unit. "Step back from the colonel," Crane directed, each word precise and non-negotiable. Trevor's hand still clutched the partially detached bronze star. Finch's gaze locked onto that hand, then traveled up to meet Trevor's eyes. "Release the medal, now." The quiet command carried more weight than a shout ever could. Trevor's fingers uncurled instantly, a reflexive response to the tone of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "Do you have any idea what those medals represent?" Burnett asked, his question directed at all three bullies, but his eyes fixed on Connor. Connor attempted a dismissive shrug, though his earlier confidence had visibly evaporated. "Just some old military stuff, man. We were just—" "That bronze star," Crane interrupted, pointing to the medal Trevor had attempted to snatch, "is awarded for heroic achievement in combat operations. Men I've served with died earning that medal." Finch added, his voice controlled but intense, "That ribbon there marks service in Vietnam. While you were decades from being born, this man was carrying wounded comrades through gunfire." Burnett took one step closer to Connor, close enough that the young man instinctively leaned back. "Every piece of bling, as you called it, represents blood, sacrifice, and honor, something you clearly know nothing about." The lieutenant commander addressed the colonel without turning, military courtesy evident in his tone. "Sir, are you all right?" "I am now, Commander," Colonel Montrose responded, his posture straightening slightly in the presence of fellow warriors. "Thank you for your assistance." The transformation in the three young men was immediate and complete. Connor's face drained of color, his earlier bravado replaced by dawning recognition of the gravity of his actions. Malik took a half step back, eyes darting between the SEALs as if calculating an escape route. "We didn't know," Trevor began, his voice cracking. "That's the problem." Finch cut him off. "You didn't care to know." Connor raised his hands in surrender. "Look, we're sorry, okay? We'll just go." "Not yet," Burnett replied, as police sirens became audible in the distance. "You wanted to learn about these medals. I think it's time you got a proper education about respect and consequences." The crowd around them had grown silent, witnesses to a moment where justice aligned perfectly with karma. The bullies' swagger had vanished completely, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that they'd picked the wrong veteran on the wrong day. Two police cruisers pulled into the square, lights flashing but sirens now silent. Officer Ramirez and her partner approached with professional caution, quickly assessing the unusual tableau. Three Navy SEALs forming a protective barrier around an elderly veteran, facing three visibly shaken young men. "We received multiple calls about harassment of a veteran," Officer Ramirez stated, notebook already in hand. Lieutenant Commander Crane stepped aside, gesturing respectfully toward Colonel Montrose. "The colonel can explain what happened." The police separated all parties, taking statements from the colonel, the SEALs, and numerous witnesses. The evidence mounted quickly. Dozens of smartphone videos, consistent eyewitness accounts, and the visible damage to the colonel's cardigan where the bronze star had nearly been torn away. "You're facing charges of harassment, attempted theft, and possibly assault," Officer Ramirez informed the three young men as her partner read them their rights. "The district attorney takes crimes against veterans very seriously in this jurisdiction." Connor, Malik, and Trevor were escorted to the waiting police vehicles, their earlier bravado replaced by the sobering reality of handcuffs and potential criminal records. Before the police cars had even left the square, the first videos appeared online. Hashtags formed organically: "Respect the Colonel," "SEALs to the rescue," "Veteran Justice." Within hours, millions had watched the confrontation and intervention. Local news teams arrived, seeking interviews with the colonel and the SEALs. National outlets picked up the story by evening, framing it as a powerful moment of intergenerational respect between warriors. In an era where respect seems optional to some, this incident reminds us that there are still lines that shouldn't be crossed, one commentator noted, as footage of the SEALs protecting Colonel Montrose played in the background. Online forums filled with stories from other veterans who had experienced similar disrespect, creating conversations about how communities could better honor those who served. Throughout the commotion, Colonel Montrose maintained remarkable composure. He declined most interview requests but spoke briefly to thank the SEALs and the community for their support. "These medals aren't about me," he told a local reporter, gently touching the bronze star that a nearby military tailor had professionally reattached to his cardigan free of charge. "They represent all who served alongside me, especially those who never came home." When asked about pressing charges, the colonel's response revealed his character. Those young men need education, not just punishment. Perhaps community service at the Veterans Center would teach them what these medals truly mean. Even in the face of disrespect, Colonel Montrose exemplified the very values his medals represented: courage, dignity, and compassion toward others. If this moment moves you as much as it moves me, take a second right now to hit that like button and share this video. Our veterans deserve recognition, and your simple act helps spread this powerful message of respect. Ask yourself, how can we better honor those who sacrificed everything for our freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The day's events could have ended there. A case of disrespect met with justice, captured on video and shared widely. But what happened next would transform a single incident into a movement that no one, especially the three young bullies, could have anticipated. Within a week of the incident, the downtown square transformed into an impromptu gathering place for veterans and supporters. What began as a few people bringing flowers to the spot where Colonel Montrose had been harassed evolved into organized community action. Mayor Richardson, himself a former Marine, announced the creation of the Montrose Respect Initiative, allocating city funds for educational programs about military service and the significance of military decorations. Local businesses quickly matched the funding, doubling the initiative's impact. "One incident opened our eyes to how much work we still need to do," the mayor stated during the announcement ceremony. "This isn't about politics, it's about honoring sacrifices made for all Americans." The War Memorial in the square, previously visited mostly by veterans, became a focal point for community gatherings. Fresh flowers appeared daily, alongside notes thanking service members past and present. The local school district implemented a new curriculum component focusing on military history and the stories behind common medals and decorations. Veterans, including Colonel Montrose himself, visited classrooms to share first-hand accounts of their service. "When I show students my bronze star, I tell them about the men who deserved it more than I did," the colonel told a classroom of attentive teenagers. "These medals represent teams, not individuals." The public library created a permanent exhibition displaying replicas of military medals alongside the stories of local veterans who earned them. Interactive elements allowed visitors to learn about the rigorous training, sacrifice, and courage behind each decoration. Perhaps most significantly, the Veterans Center established a Shadow a Vet program, allowing young people to spend time with veterans, helping with everyday tasks while learning about their experiences. The waiting list for participation grew longer each week. Sergeant Burnett, Lieutenant Commander Crane, and Petty Officer Finch became reluctant local celebrities. Despite their preference for avoiding the spotlight, typical of their profession, they recognized the opportunity to channel public attention toward meaningful change. The three SEALs established a monthly fitness challenge that paired civilians with veterans for team-based competitions. These events broke down barriers between generations while raising funds for veterans' mental health services. "We're not heroes for what happened that day," Burnett insisted during a rare interview. "We simply did what anyone should do when witnessing disrespect toward someone who served our country." Their unit commander officially commended them for their off-duty actions, noting that they embodied the core values of their training even in civilian clothes. For Connor, Malik, and Trevor, the consequences extended far beyond legal penalties. Their names and faces had become nationally recognized symbols of disrespect, creating challenges they hadn't anticipated. Following Colonel Montrose's recommendation, the judge ordered 500 hours of community service at the Veterans Center rather than jail time. There, under the watchful eyes of men and women who had served in conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan, the three young men began a difficult education. The first week was the hardest, Connor later admitted during a community forum. Every veteran knew who we were and what we'd done. But instead of hatred, they showed us something unexpected. They showed us brotherhood. The three worked alongside aging veterans, hearing stories that transformed medals from mere objects into profound symbols of sacrifice. They cleaned memorial plaques, organized events, and gradually earned a measure of redemption through genuine contrition and hard work. Trevor, who had attempted to remove the Bronze Star, found himself particularly transformed by the experience. He enrolled in ROTC the following semester, his first step toward military service of his own. 6 months after the incident, Colonel Montrose sat on a bench near the war memorial, watching children play in the autumn leaves. A local journalist found him there, seeking his reflections on how a single confrontation had changed the community. "Those medals were never about me," the colonel began, his voice soft but clear. "Each one represents men I served with, many who never came home to receive recognition. When those young men grabbed at my Bronze Star, they weren't just disrespecting me. They were disrespecting every soldier who earned similar honors through blood and sacrifice." He paused, watching a young family place flowers at the memorial. "What surprised me wasn't the disrespect. I've seen that before. What surprised me was how quickly others stood up to defend not just me, but what these medals represent." The colonel touched the Bronze Star on his cardigan, now properly secured. "This isn't merely medal and ribbon. This is memory made physical. This is brotherhood preserved." In a speech at the Veterans Center dedication ceremony, Colonel Montrose expanded on the meaning behind military decorations. "These medals tell stories that words often cannot," he explained to the gathered crowd. "The Medal of Honor speaks of moments when ordinary humans found extraordinary courage. Campaign ribbons mark years spent away from family, serving in distant lands. Service medals commemorate dedication to something larger than oneself." He continued, his voice growing stronger. "When you see decorated veterans, understand that each symbol carries weight. Emotional, historical, personal. These aren't fashion accessories. They're chapters of American history worn over the heart." The incident catalyzed conversations nationwide about respect for veterans. Military historians noted that societies throughout history have been measured by how they treat those who fought their battles. "What those SEALs did represents the best of America," observed Dr. Eleanor Hammond, professor of military history. "They demonstrated that respect for service transcends generations, branches of military, and political divides. When they formed that protective circle around Colonel Montrose, they were defending more than one man. They were defending a principle." The colonel himself offered perhaps the most powerful perspective during a high school assembly. Respect isn't automatic. It must be taught, learned, and practiced. Those young men didn't understand what they were mocking because somewhere along the way, that education failed them. Their community service isn't punishment. It's the education they should have received years ago. He concluded with words that many students later described as life-changing. "Honor isn't just for those who serve in uniform. Honor lives in how we treat each other, how we defend dignity, and how we respond when values we cherish are threatened." 9 minutes changed everything. For a decorated veteran, for 3 misguided young men, and for a community that rediscovered what respect truly means. Colonel Arthur Montrose stood alone that day, but he never stands alone again. The protective circle formed by those Navy SEALs has expanded, encompassing an entire community awakened to its responsibility toward those who served. This isn't just a story about bullies facing consequences. It's about the invisible threads that connect generations of warriors. It's about the sacred trust between a nation and those who risk everything to defend it. It's about how quickly justice can arrive when the right people happen to be nearby. Ask yourself, what would you have done if you witnessed that confrontation? Would you have remained a bystander, or would you have found the courage to step forward? How do we ensure the next generation understands what those medals truly represent? The medals on Colonel Montrose's chest weren't simply decorations. They were physical embodiments of courage, sacrifice, and duty. When the SEALs defended him, they weren't just protecting an elderly man. They were honoring a sacred covenant between warriors that transcends time. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs this reminder about respect and honor. Your comments matter. Tell us about veterans in your life who deserve recognition, or share how this story impacted your perspective. For more powerful veteran stories like this one, visit our channel page where we upload new content daily. Check the description below for our most compelling videos about military justice and respect. Each story is carefully selected to honor those who served and remind us all what true courage looks like. Until next time, remember, respect isn't just given, sometimes it must be defended, 9 minutes at a time.